Independent MP Andrew Wilkie says his plans for poker machine reform are very much alive, but there's speculation tonight of a compromise deal. Mr Wilkie has been travelling across the nation for what he called a period of intense discussion on his push for a mandatory pre-commitment scheme, which the federal government had supported. It's thought that any new deal might involve a lengthy trial of proposed measures. I spoke earlier to CEO of Clubs ACT, Jeff House, who's agreed to be part of those trials. Jeff House, Andrew Wilkie has said today there's no reason to think mandatory pre-commitment is off the table. How close do you think he is to getting the reforms he wants?
I think he's a little further away today than he was a couple of days ago. I think what Andrew Wilkie has done is realise that he doesn't have the votes in the House of Representatives to pass the legislation which would give effect to mandatory pre-commitment. Notwithstanding that, we stand ready to work with the government on a trial to see whether the technology would actually work.
Yes, you've been talking to the government about this trial. How would it work?
Well, those details are yet to be finalised, but essentially mid-last year I approached the Commonwealth with an offer to discuss the option of a trial in the ACT. And I have been working with Jenny Macklin's department on some initial information about the age profile of machines in gaming machines in the ACT, and that's where the discussions have ended up. But obviously, with the Prime Minister's statement yesterday, I expect the circumstance to change a little over the next week or so.
So would it be about just the technology and how you could make it work, or would it be about whether it will actually assist the problem gambling issue?
Look, I've got no interest in running a trial which is simply designed to support a decision which is already made or a foregone conclusion. The trial needs to be genuine in as much as it needs to inform the decision-making as to whether or not pre-commitment works. That was the recommendation of the Productivity Commission, and that's what we want to see.
But would you abide by that decision if it was found that it did work? Would you be happy to go ahead with that idea?
Look, absolutely. I think if at the end of the day the trial demonstrates that mandatory pre-commitment is not just effective, but importantly cost-effective, and that's a very important rider to have on it, then we would be bound to have a serious look at implementing the technology. But there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before we get to that point.
Andrew Wilkie says that despite what the clubs industry has been saying, he also supports the idea of a trial.
Well, I think Andrew Wilkie has previously been on the record as supporting just a technical trial. That is a trial which is designed to support a predetermined decision. I don't think he's ever stated his support for a trial which would actually inform the decision-making process, and certainly that's what we've been calling for the last 6 or so months. Now,
there's been talk also of a compromise, perhaps the idea of $1 bets. What's your view of that?
Look, $1 max bets still falls into that category of a cluster bomb approach of dealing with all gamblers as if they were problem gamblers. I think we need to be much more sophisticated about how we deal with this issue. We need to be targeted. We need to identify problem gamblers, get them out of the venues and get them into counselling so they can overcome what is an addiction.
Nick Xenophon has suggested that the Prime Minister isn't serious about poker machine reform, that she's setting these reforms up to fail.
Well, I don't know what's in the mind of the Prime Minister. I can only say that the discussions that I've had with the Federal Department have been held in good faith and have been positive, but that's at the departmental level. I haven't had discussions at the political level with Minister Macklin, the Prime Minister, or anyone else in Cabinet. But I do know that she knows that she doesn't have the votes to pass the legislation to meet Mr Wilkie's requirements, so something's got to give.
For your industry, is it a matter of finding a balance between the bottom line, the fact that you're running a business, and the social issue of gambling?
Yeah, that's correct. And look, in terms of mandatory pre-commitment, experience overseas has shown that clubs can expect to see revenue reductions of up to 40%. Now, I challenge any industry in Australia to withstand a 40% reduction in their principal source of revenue and survive. Balanced against that is obviously the need to continue to work to reduce the already low rates of problem gambling. And there are many measures that we can look at, and those successful measures that have been in place that we can build upon to continue to reduce those rates.
What measures do you think would work?
I think one of the measures which has been successful over the years has been the exclusion scheme, and that's where people who are identified as problem gamblers are excluded from the venues and recommended to counselling services, and they don't get back into the venue unless they have a recommendation from that counselling service that their addiction has been overcome. I think we need to get better at targeting and identifying problem gamblers, and there are ways that we can do that.
And have you had the chance to put this idea forward?
Well, exclusion schemes operate in states and territories right now, and I've certainly always been of the view that we need to take that initial step of examining the processes and measures that we have in place right now to see how effective they have been and build on those.
Does the delay bother you, or in a sense is it good for you to be able to just maintain the status quo for now?
Look, I'm concerned at the rush that everyone seems to have been in to pass this legislation, to get it implemented. It's incredibly complex technology, and I think the issue itself is much more complex than a technical solution will ever solve. So I think the more time we have for cooler heads to prevail and sit down and have a discussion, I think the better for the industry, I think the better for the government, and I think the better for problem gamblers.
Jeff House, thanks for speaking to us.
It's a pleasure.